This is yet another chilling tale of a trucker that sends shivers down my spine. It unfolds in the vast expanse of the desolate roads of Texas, where the roar of engines and the lament of the wind intertwine in a solitary symphony. A solitary trucker named Tom embarked on his nightly journey as always. It was a dark and stormy night, with rain lashing against the windshield of his old truck and darkness devouring the light of his headlights. As he drove along the endless road, a sense of unease gripped Tom. The trees on either side of the road swayed with an unusual intensity, as if they were whispering sinister warnings. Ignoring his nerves, Tom pressed on, trying to focus on the road, and suddenly his radio went silent and he saw something in the distance, a tall, dark figure standing in the middle of the road. Tom slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest as the truck screeched to a halt. The figure, barely visible in the rain and darkness, seemed to be shrouded in rags and emitted an ominous aura. Frowning, Tom climbed down from the truck and cautiously approached the figure. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. But he received no response. The figure remained motionless, its arms outstretched towards him as if waiting for something. Suddenly, a chill ran down Tom's spine as he realized something was wrong. The figure had no face, just a dark void where human features should be. Horrified, he stepped back, but before he could retreat, the figure began to move slowly towards him as if gliding over the wet pavement. With his heart in his throat, Tom ran back to his truck and climbed in, slamming his foot on the accelerator. The engine roared as the truck shot down the road, but the dark figure continued to pursue him relentlessly, moving with a speed that defied all logic. Terror gripped Tom as he realized he couldn't shake off his pursuer. Desperate, he dialed the emergency number on his phone. But when he held the device to his ear, all he heard was distorted static. Driving at full speed, Tom spotted the flickering lights of an abandoned gas station in the distance. Hoping to find help, he turned sharply onto the entrance road, skidding on the wet pavement. He brought the truck to a stop in front of the decrepit structure and jumped out, looking around for shelter. The gas station seemed deserted, but Tom felt he was not alone. The whispers of the wind seemed to form words in his mind, words of warning and condemnation. With his heart in his mouth, he entered the building, desperately searching for a place to hide. But what he found inside was even more terrifying. The walls were covered in dark graffiti and sinister symbols, and in the center of the room lay an improvised altar adorned with melted candles and strange objects. The air was thick with a dark and oppressive energy that seemed to suffocate any hope of salvation. Before he could retreat, the dark figure emerged from the shadows, its presence filling the room with a palpable sense of terror. Tom recoiled, trapped between the figure and the closed door behind him. He knew there was no escape. Then, in an instant, everything stopped. Silence fell heavily over the gas station, and the figure vanished into the darkness as if it had never been there. Tom stood paralyzed for a moment, unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed, but his confusion was interrupted by a sinister sound echoing in the distance. The howling of wolves drawing near. With his heart filled with panic, Tom realized that the night still held more horrors to be discovered, and that his fight for survival had barely begun. Breathing heavily, Tom hurried to find a safe place within the abandoned gas station. His eyes scanned every dark corner for any sign of danger. The echo of the wolves' howls drew closer, enveloping the gas station in an even more terrifying atmosphere. Then, in the midst of the agonizing silence, he heard a soft whisper coming from a corner. Intrigued and fearful, Tom approached slowly, his heart pounding. There, hidden in the shadows, he found an old man with a somber look and a disturbing gleam in his eyes. "Who are you?" Tom asked. Struggling to control his trembling voice, the old man slowly lifted his gaze, revealing a sinister smile that chilled Tom's blood. "I am the guardian of this place," the old man whispered with a voice that seemed to resonate from the depths of darkness. "And you, trucker, have entered a realm of nightmare." The old man's words sent shivers down Tom's spine. Before he could respond, the sound of claws scraping against the pavement echoed from outside. The wolves were closer. Their presence felt like an imminent threat. The old man stood up slowly, his eyes gleaming with unsettling malice. "There is no escape for you, Tom," he murmured. "The night has claimed you, and now it belongs to you." Tom recoiled, his heart filled with terror. The situation seemed increasingly desperate as the howls of the wolves grew louder. He desperately searched for an exit, but all the doors seemed to be sealed by an unknown force. Then, in one last act of desperation, Tom ran towards the nearest window and smashed it with a desperate blow. The cold night air and rain greeted him as he leaped out of the gas station with the howls of the wolves chasing him into the darkness. He ran through the field, his heart pounding in his chest, but the wolves were close, their eyes gleaming in the darkness as they pursued him mercilessly. Tom knew his only hope was to find help before it was too late. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of frantic fleeing, he spotted the lights of a town in the distance. With the last breath of energy left in him, he ran toward the relative safety of civilization, praying to leave behind the nightmare he had lived through that night on the desolate roads of Texas. He tried to call his wife hundreds of times, but due to the storm, he had no signal. He entered a tavern and asked for a landline phone, but he was out of luck again. With a trembling voice, he asked the bartender to point out the nearest hotel so he could spend the night. Finally, curled up in a room of a mediocre and dark hotel, he tried to find refuge. But deep in his heart, he knew that the darkness would always pursue him, waiting for the right moment to claim him once again in its cold embrace. When Tom collapsed onto the bed in the dimly lit hotel room, fatigue weighed heavily on his shoulders. His mind was filled with the events of the night, each moment etched into his memory with vivid detail. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him, and he found himself tormented by the chilling encounters on the desolate roads of Texas. The howls of the wolves echoed in his mind, mixing with the sinister whispers of the wind and the ominous presence of the faceless figure. No matter how hard he tried, Tom couldn't shake the feeling of terror that clung to him like a suffocating shroud. As the night wore on, Tom's thoughts returned to the abandoned gas station and the enigmatic old man he had encountered. Who was he and what dark secrets did he hold? The memory of the old man's sinister smile sent shivers down his spine, reminding him of the inevitable nightmare that had enveloped him. But amid the terror and confusion, one question burned in Tom's mind. What had happened to him that night? What invisible forces had conspired to trap him in their web of darkness? With a heavy heart, Tom realized that he might never find the answers he sought. The events of that fateful night would remain shrouded in mystery, haunting him forever like a ghost from the past. When dawn illuminated the horizon, casting its faint light into the room, Tom knew he could never go back to his life as a truck driver. The roads that once sustained him now only inspired fear and uncertainty. With a heavy sigh, Tom got out of bed and gathered his few belongings. Stepping out into the dim morning light, he vowed to leave behind the horrors of the night, forging a new path free from the shadow of the darkness that had consumed him. Slowly, he walked back in search of his truck at the abandoned gas station where he had left it. As he approached the place, a sense of fear once again gripped him. The whispers of the wind echoed in his ears like an ominous warning. Upon reaching the truck, Tom felt a chill run down his spine. The dark figure that had pursued him was standing next to the truck, its presence filling the air with a malevolent energy. With his heart pounding, Tom came to a sudden stop, too afraid to get any closer, breathless now. The figure remained silent, its oppressive presence enveloping Tom in an atmosphere of terror. Then, with a voice resonating with ancient force, the figure spoke. "You have entered a world of shadows and secrets, Tom," said the figure. "And now, there is no turning back. Your destiny is intertwined with ours, and you cannot escape." Tom stepped back, his mind struggling to comprehend the figure's words. What did all this mean? How had he ended up trapped in the midst of such a dark nightmare? Who would believe what was happening to him? A new sound broke the dawn silence, the howling of wolves drawing nearer and nearer. Tom knew his time was running out, that he had to get into his truck quickly and drive away before it was too late. But deep down, Tom knew that the darkness would always be a part of him, lurking in the corners of his mind, waiting for the right moment to strike again. After that unexpected night, as much as it pained him to leave his job as a truck driver after 20 years of traversing long roads, which paid his bills and supported his family, Tom was devastated and never able to regain his sanity. He never got back into his truck and never knew what happened that night. If you have enjoyed this story, we invite you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any others. Until next time. Good evening, Horror Stories. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Robert. My grandfather was a truck driver all his life. I still remember how he used to take my siblings and me for rides in his truck. Those are childhood memories that, honestly, I will never forget. He was a very good and hardworking person, although he had a strong character. With us, he was always very attentive and loving. He used to tell us stories about his experiences on the road with his truck. He had many experiences, both good and bad, and some truly terrifying ones like the one I have decided to share today. My grandfather traveled constantly on the roads, as this activity was the livelihood for him and his family. Sometimes my grandmother would accompany him on his trips, although most of the time he worked alone, as he did on this occasion, transporting goods on the American highways. It was almost dusk when he left Oklahoma on Route 35. There were still about 6 hours left to reach his destination. He said he was driving very slowly due to the rain, which made the pavement slippery. That day he was hauling a double trailer, which required an even slower speed for safety reasons. The sky was completely gray, with many lightning bolts and strong winds, which worried him because the weather was very dangerous, especially while transporting a double trailer. Although he had a lot of experience, it is always risky to drive at night in those conditions, especially on a winding and somewhat narrow road. The night finally fell completely, and he kept driving. There wasn't much traffic on the road, which made him quite happy as it meant he wouldn't lose even more time. He kept his attention fixed, with the windshield wipers on and the truck's high beams on, aware that he was going to take longer than usual due to the double trailer and the rain. Suddenly, he had to slow down even more as he approached a bridge. According to what he told us, there was a dam below that was almost dry, with barely any water accumulating. He told us that at first he thought his mind was playing tricks on him when he saw a silhouette while driving. The visibility was very limited due to the rain and darkness. However, as he slowly advanced with his truck, he distinguished two people walking hand in hand, a woman and a child who seemed to be about 6 or 7 years old. As he got closer, he confirmed that it wasn't his imagination. They were indeed two people. It seemed extremely strange to him to see someone walking at those hours on a bridge without a crosswalk or pedestrian path, especially in an area where there wasn't even a nearby town. The bridge was exclusively for vehicles, so he was very concerned to see a woman with a child there, risking being run over in the darkness. He decided to approach to offer them help and take them to a safer place where they would not be in danger or get wet. However, as he was about to reach them, the woman slowly turned around, stared at him, and lifted the child, throwing him off the bridge. My grandfather slammed on the brakes, leaving tire marks on the pavement. The rear trailer began to zigzag, and if he hadn't been wearing a seatbelt, he probably would have been thrown out. When he finally managed to control the truck, he sat there for a few seconds, trying to comprehend what had happened. Before he could react, he saw the woman also jump off the bridge. At that moment, he ran out of the truck, leaving the lights on and the engine running. Under the intense rain, he hurried to the edge of the bridge, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked down, hoping to see something in the darkness, but all he could distinguish were blurry shadows and the sound of distant water in the nearly dry dam. Desperate, he took out his flashlight from his pocket and turned it on, sweeping the beam of light over the area under the bridge. He didn't see anyone, neither the woman nor the child. Fear and confusion overwhelmed him. He returned to the truck, soaked and trembling, and called the police to report the incident. As he waited, he sat behind the wheel, still in shock, replaying over and over again what he had seen. Shortly after, the authorities arrived, and they began to search the area with more flashlights and appropriate equipment. My grandfather told them everything in detail, from the moment he saw the silhouettes to the woman's jump. The police took his statement and they started searching until dawn. My grandfather didn't want to leave until he found them, but they found no trace of the woman or the child, not even footprints of any body. So they interrogated my grandfather again, to the point of asking if he had been drinking alcohol and if he had rested well. They asked for all the paperwork of the cargo in the truck. They had to rule out any hypothesis. The officers were very upset. Hours had passed and they found no evidence to confirm what my grandfather had said. He reiterated over and over again that he had clearly seen a woman with a child, and that the woman had thrown the child off the bridge before jumping herself. However, the officers responded that it was very strange for there to be people walking on that bridge, where only vehicles pass. After a few minutes taking all his information, the officers allowed him to continue his journey. My grandfather got back into the truck, still stunned by the events of the night. He resumed his journey with a mind full of unanswered questions, trying to focus on the road. He was driving slowly, with the rain still hitting the windshield and the rear trailer making itself felt at every turn. The restlessness did not leave him. From time to time he looked in the rearview mirror, hoping to see some sign, something that would tell him he hadn't lost his mind. Finally, after several hours of travel, he arrived at his destination. He unloaded the load and prepared to rest at a nearby motel. The image of the woman and child still haunted him, making it difficult for him to fall asleep. The days passed, and upon returning home, he tried to resume his routine. However, he couldn't help but investigate a little more about that bridge and its surroundings. He talked to other truckers and locals, hoping to find some clue or similar story, and discovered that this bridge was called the Bridge of Death. Intrigued by this revelation, my grandfather began to delve deeper. He talked to veterans of the road, heard stories of apparitions and unexplained events that other drivers had experienced in that same place. Some claimed to have seen figures in the dark, while others swore they had heard voices or screams as they passed by on rainy nights. Finally, my grandfather discovered that decades ago a tragic accident had occurred. A woman and her son had fallen from the bridge during a storm, losing their lives in a car accident. Since then, numerous accounts of his appearances have emerged, fueling the legend of the Bridge of Death. This information left him amazed and, in a way, relieved. Although disturbing, knowing that others had experienced similar events and that there was a story behind what he saw offered him some peace. Over time, my grandfather accepted that some things have no logical explanation and that what he had experienced was part of a mystery bigger than himself. Although the memory of that night on the road never left him, he found solace in the idea that, in some way, he had witnessed something extraordinary, linked to a tragic and enigmatic past. If you have enjoyed this story, we invite you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any others. Until next time.